Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara held a phone call with Saudi Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman for a joint cooperation between the two countries. During the call, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman extended his wishes to Syrian President on the first anniversary of Syria's Liberation Day, affirming the kingdom's support for Syria. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Vershinin congratulated Syria on the first anniversary of Liberation Day, whilst President al-Shara has also received multiple greetings from Bahrain's King Hamad and Crown Prince Salman, along with other world leaders celebrating Syria's national occasion. Syrian Emergency Minister Raed al-Saleh and UNFPA representatives Ensra Ahmed has held talks on boosting cooperation in emergency response, including updating Syria's national risk assessment matrix. Both sides have stressed stronger coordination, greater women's participation in response teams. Arab and Muslim governments have rejected Tony Blair's inclusion on Donald Trump's proposed Board of Peace for Gaza, leading to Blair being dropped from consideration. Hamas officials Hussam Badrein has urged mediators to increase pressure on Israel, saying the ceasefire cannot advance amid at least 38 reported violations by Israel since October, as Gaza's health ministry says 377 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli fire since the truce began, underscoring the depth of the ongoing crisis. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will send the United States an updated plan for Ukraine. He says that he wants to discuss Ukraine's restoration as part of the peace plan preparations. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the country could hold elections within 60 to 90 days if the US and Europe provide security guarantees. He adds that he would move to change the law once those guarantees are secured. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has spoken with Ukraine's Prime Minister discussing expanding the country's ability to purchase American LNG. He has also highlighted U.S. President Donald Trump's commitment to lasting peace in Ukraine. Now for this hour, we start with Israel and Gaza. The United Nations warns that thousands of children in Gaza continues to suffer from severe malnutrition despite the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas that began in October. UNICEF, which is the main provider of malnutrition treatment in the region, has reported that 9,300 children were treated for acute malnutrition last month. While this is an improvement from over 14,000 cases in August, the figure remains 5 times higher than during the February-March ceasefire. UNICEF spokesperson Tess Ingram has described meeting underweight babies struggling to survive, emphasizing that aid flows remain insufficient. Although more supplies are entering Gaza, obstacles such as water delays, road closures, and security issues continue to limit the access. Essential items still remain expensive for most families, driving malnutrition rates. Humanitarian agencies are calling for all crossings into Gaza to remain open to ensure adequate food and medical support, warning that prolonged malnutrition could cause lasting damage to the region's children. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Alon Pincus. He's a former Israeli ambassador, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, what more is happening among Gazans about their malnutrition that UN has issued the warning about, and what are the challenges leading to this? That they're unable to access food. What's happening with Israel? What's happening with Hamas? Ambassador, you might be muted here. If you can please unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. Is this better?
Thank you very much. Yes, it's perfect. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, it's my mistake.
Thank you.
I was saying, Asuma, that you were answering your own question, and I agree with you. No. That's good. That I agree with you. Look,
Thank
yes,
you.
there is a ceasefire. However, humanitarian aid is not getting in the quantities that are required. There is a severe shortage of potable water, and as for the malnutrition, this needs to be dealt with medically. And there are almost no functioning hospitals or clinics in Gaza. There is a manpower shortage of doctors, nurses, medical workers, paramedics, and what have you. And the entire Gaza Strip is essentially in ruins and rubble. So there's no way from getting from one place to another. And if your children, your sister's children, if your neighbor's children are suffering from malnutrition, you don't even know where to go. There's no one to direct you. There's no phone system, emergency phone system. I mean, yeah, there is, but it's barely functioning. And so, unless you asked about what can be done, unless there is a huge, significant infusion of humanitarian aid and medical personnel into Gaza, which I'm not seeing. We will continue, unfortunately and tragically, to see these reports.
And Ambassador, we know that there's a lot of trust issues between these UN-run aid agencies and Israel, as well as even on Hamas and other agents who are to be distributing aid to these people. Is there any aid organization or agency that can be trusted to distribute aid to these people?
Tragically, no. I mean, yeah, you have the UN, which everyone should trust, but yet Israel does not trust. You had the UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Relief. They're not working, UNRWA. Then you have all those sorts of Gaza Foundation operations that existed in the last 6 months. They basically closed shop and they no longer operate. So what is needed and is not happening is some kind of a provisional government in Gaza. Gaza right now is not governed. It is ruled by brute force by the remains of what remained of Hamas. But they're not providing, they are not dispensing basic and fundamental government services such as medical aid and nutrition and food centers and places where people could come and be fed. And unless there is a group that is willing to do this, and there won't be a group like this until what is called the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, which is that body, that amorphous body that was agreed on during the ceasefire, but has yet to be established. Unless they start governing Gaza and opening up for these kind of humanitarian aid and medical aid operations, again, we're going to tragically see these reports piling up.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic. Now, viewers, we stay in the region. Reporters Without Borders, an NGO, has said that Israel has killed more journalists in 2025 than any other country in the world. According to an annual report published by the RSF, Israeli forces, which carried out the war in Gaza, was responsible for the deaths of 29 Palestinian reporters. It was the third consecutive year running that Israel was named the top in the list by the NGO. Mexico is the second most dangerous country in the world for journalists, with 9 killed in the past year. According to the report, war ravaged Ukraine, where 3 journalists were killed in 2025, and Sudan, where 4 journalists were killed this year, are other highly dangerous countries for journalists. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back former ambassador Elon Pinkas. He's former ambassador, Israeli ambassador, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how long do you think it would take for Israel to Israel to allow other, journalists, foreign journalists, to enter Gaza?
Right. Well, that's a very good question. I'm sure that many international news outlets like you or like others from all over the world would like to go into Gaza and report what they're seeing and what's going on in Gaza. The thing is, right now, and I go back to our previous conversation, Asuma, the thing is that Gaza is now politically, it's a no man's land. Israel sort of withdrew, but not entirely. Hamas is sort of destroyed, but not really. There's no functioning government to manage these kind of journalists' incursions into Gaza, and there's no political authority that would welcome them, that would escort them. Now, you may say that you're willing to go to Gaza without such an escort, but then you're in a war zone, and Israel won't allow this to happen for for obvious reasons. Look. I don't know when Israel will allow journalists to come in, but I can imagine that if and when there is that international stabilization force that we spoke about a moment ago, if that is established, even if it's not 100% complete and not 100% functioning, then you will see, the permits for journalists or for news organizations to go in. Right now, but there's also a political angle to this. We have to admit, right now, Israel has no interest in allowing journalists into Gaza, because what they will report is undoubtedly and unequivocally going to be uncomplimentary, to put it mildly, to Israel.
And like as you rightfully mentioned in our previous discussion, Ambassador, you also mentioned that right now Gaza doesn't have any political figure that is legitimate. So how, as news organization, what reports are we to take seriously when all we have is to only take and report the reports of the casualties reported by Hamas-run Health Ministry of Gaza about the death, and so what are we to trust here, and how significant or how urgent this issue should be for Israel to allow the other reporters, such as our organization you mentioned, and other many organizations who want to get in there, who want to report what is actually happening, and not just take the reports coming directly out of Hamas-run health organization.
Well, you're right. You raise an excellent point, Asuma, because if indeed Israel is right, and the Palestinian health authorities, the Hamas health ministry, manipulated data and came out with exaggerated numbers, then Israel should have a vested interest in allowing the international media or the UN or any kind of human rights organizations into Gaza to prove the point. Yet Israel is not allowing it, perhaps because it knows that while numbers we're manipulating, the numbers are pretty much real. Israel is saying, oh, it's not true that over 70,000 were killed in Gaza. Well, prove, if you can, prove that there have been less, and prove that many of them, or most of them, were indeed combatants. I think Israel is going to find it extraordinarily difficult to prove that. Now, there have been other estimates of the number of casualties done through a statistical model that takes a neighborhood. You take an aerial photo, a drone photo of a neighborhood. You know how many buildings are there. You know how many people live there. You know how many people fled. So you do the math, because if you had 100% people living there and 60% left, that means that 40% were probably killed. 40% out of that number, you add that and throughout Gaza, and you reach a number that is not far from 70,000. Now, I'm not saying that this statistical model is absolutely accurate. Obviously not. It does not, it does not see actual bodies of people who have been tragically killed or killed during the war. But it's the closest approximation that we have. And so back to your question, until and when international media and international organizations go into Gaza, the numbers that we have are the numbers that we have.
Right. Yes, unfortunately. But thank you
Yes.
very much, Ambassador, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay in the region now. Now, moving on, Israel and Bolivia have formally renewed diplomatic relations by ending more than a decade of estrangement with the signing of a joint declaration in Washington. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar and his Bolivian counterpart, Fernando Ramallo, signed the agreement during a ceremony which was also attended by Bolivia's Minister of Finance and Economy, José Gabriel Espinosa. Bolivia's left-wing government of Evo Morales broke diplomatic ties with Israel in 2009 during a three-week war in response to Hamas's rocket attacks, with relations being restored in 2019, although Morales later cut ties again shortly after the Israel-Hamas war began in 2023. Now again, the new center-right government of President Rodrigo Paz, who took office in November, seeks warmer ties with Israel and the U.S. by renewing it. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back former Israeli Ambassador Elon Pinkas from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how long do you think this peace kind of situation between Bolivia and Israel could last? We can only speculate here. And also, can you tell us a little bit briefly about the history behind Bolivia and Israel's on and off situation?
Yeah, I don't want to go into too much history and details, not to bore our viewers. Look, Israel traditionally had very good relations with many countries in South America, in Latin America, Central America and South America, but I'm focusing on South America. But, as all kinds of leftist revolutionary regimes came to power in Bolivia and in Venezuela, and in other places, in Paraguay at some point, in Chile at some point, then relations soured, and they had this, the non-aligned, which India was a part of at the time, the non-aligned movement, and they all thought they were fighting an anti-colonial war, and Israel is a result of colonial occupation, and so on and so forth. Now, good relations were always maintained with countries like Argentina and Uruguay and Peru and Mexico, that's Central America. But there was always a problem, and Colombia, but there was always a problem with Bolivia, Venezuela, and at some point with Colombia in recent years. Now that there's a ceasefire, one should hope that these these tensions will simmer down. Governments have changed, governments in South America, not so much in Israel. Look, a country should always strive to have good diplomatic relations with everyone. That goes without saying, and as a former diplomat would be the first to attest to that. But let's also not exaggerate the importance of the time that we did not have a relationship, full diplomatic relations with Bolivia, and now the agreement to reestablish and renew them. It's in the grand scheme of things, it's important, but it's not a big deal.
Right. And how will this, a warming relations between Bolivia and Bolivia's current government stance, how do you think this will be affecting their domestic political dynamics?
I doubt it will have a domestic. I don't know that many people in Bolivia care so much. I mean, everyone is exposed to international media, and everyone has a smartphone, and everyone goes on TikTok or Instagram or news websites or social networks, so people know. I mean, this is not 30, 40 years ago when either you read it in the newspaper or you just didn't know what was going on in Sri Lanka or South Korea or Bolivia. Now everyone knows in real time, but I don't know that it's going to have a major effect. Again, it depends on how things develop in the Middle East. I mean, if the ceasefire will break and war resumes, then all hell is going to break loose. Then you and I can have this conversation again, and you will ask, why did Bolivia sever diplomatic relations with Israel again? Of course, I'm speculating, but yeah, you never know. It depends on developments. But again, it's important, but it's not a big deal.
Yes, we will be eyeing that, Ambassador. Thank you so much for joining us today in NewsX World. That was Mr. Alan Pincus. He was a former Israeli ambassador, joined us live from Tel Aviv. Now we move on to our next news. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned a referral by Yemen's Houthis of some of the dozens of UN staffs they have detained to a special criminal court. UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric has said that the Houthis have arbitrarily detained 59 Yemeni UN personnel who have been held for years without any due process in violation of international law. Houthis have controlled most of Yemen, including the capital Sana'a, since seizing power in 2014 and early 2015. Let's in fact listen into what the UN spokesperson has shared.
Gravely concerned about the continued arbitrary detention of 59 of our UN personnel, in addition to dozens of personnel from NGOs, civil society, and diplomatic missions. He condemns the referral by the Houthi de facto authorities of United Nations personnel to their special criminal court. The United Nations personnel have been held incommunicado, some for many years, without any due process, in violations of international law. United Nations personnel, including those who are nationals of Yemen, are immune from legal process in respect to all acts performed by them in their official capacity. We call on the de facto authorities to rescind the referral and work in good faith towards the immediate release of all UN detained personnel of the United Nations, NGOs, and diplomatic community. The United Nations remains committed to supporting the people of Yemen and delivering principled humanitarian assistance. And that statement has been shared with you.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Ms. Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Shruti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, it seems like it's very overdue and late what UN is finally doing for this, their staffs held for years, some for years in Yemen. So what options does the United Nations have to pressure the Houthis into releasing these 59 detained Yemeni UN personnel?
Greetings, Asuma. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
What I understand is that UN is acting very, very late. I think in mid-September, they finally moved out the UN envoy to Yemen from the Sana'a, which is the US Houthi-controlled region, to the Republic of Yemen-controlled, internationally recognized region, and which new capital has been designated as Aden. So they have just now transferred their envoy. So since the Houthi rebellion and the division of the state within one recognized and one unrecognized groups, they have, since 2015, they did not make these moves. They have consistently moved their staff, asked for relocation of that staff, but it has never shown up in this particular way. They have, if I'm correct, I know that in 2021, Houthi started rounding up the World Food Program people, the UNICEF people as spies of the espionage triangle, calling them a member of the Saudi, Israel, and American spy network. And most of these, if they are international, the UN envoy would unfortunately have to go and plead and beg in a across the table discussion with these warlords and ask for the release of the international ones. They would still let go, but the locals do not have that kind of protection because they still come under the Yemen, the Houthi region of political military control, and they were subjected to the law that the Houthis decided for them. So in 2021, they started rounding people up. In 2021, they rounded up staffers that were working in 2015 also. So during at that time when the Saudi-led air raids were happening on the Yemen side, they accused in 2021 a few staffers of being part of that network and then keeping them under strict control. This was the staffer that the UN Secretary has been talking about, Guterres is talking about, that Some of them have been captured for years. So that though some of them were captured in 2021, there has been no communication. We do not know how they're kept, in what state of torture or life or death are they, and what are the crimes that they're actually accused of. There is no proof. There is no resolution of this particular conflict. What I do know is that repeatedly they keep attacking UN staffers, and most of the international ones are let go, the locals are kept back, and now 59 of them have been transferred to the Special Criminal Court. Last time 17 of them were given a death sentence by a firing squad. So the future of these 59 now hang in balance. No matter what the UN now comes out and says, their actions are a little too late. If in 2021, if the staffers were being targeted, they should have acted and protected their local assets against this kind of betrayal of trust that they are now facing at the hands of the Houthis. So by talking to a terrorist, you cannot find a midway ground. They will only let go of a few. The current ones that are being detained are accused of collaborating with Israel in the August 28 air attacks, which killed a lot of Houthi top officials. So now we're back again. Any attack on a Houthi, and a UN employee will take the brunt of it. And the protection is lacking. And until and unless the donors as well as international bodies pressurize UN itself, which is supposed to be an international body, to take people away from conflict zone, they're going to continue to face something like this.
Yes, and thank you for laying it all the recent developments out here for us and our viewers. Shruti, and lastly, how could this escalation now further affect this ongoing, late indeed, but these diplomatic efforts to negotiate a political settlement in Yemen, between Yemen and also UN? And is there any regional actor that can respond effectively to this?
Maybe Iran, because Houthis are Iran-backed. Maybe the Qataris, but I do not see the Saudis and the UAE are ineffectual, because any interference from that side is going to be looked at as a hostile intervention into the internal workings of the Houthi-controlled region. The Republic of Yemen, which is internationally recognized, cannot interfere because they are again warring factions. Israel will not be able to help. USA is looked at with hostile eyes. So international actors as such may not play that bigger role that we know of. The only ones that can actually pull this off are Qataris and Qataris maybe, and Iran, because Houthis are Shiites mostly, and Iran is a Shiite nation. So maybe they can, have a little bit of influence on how this goes through. I do believe that the last time Indian was held, was facing charges in a Houthi-controlled region, the Shiite clergy had come forth from the Indian side and interacted with the people on the other side, and the process of diplomacy was much easier and was easily controlled. So maybe now the world has come to a point where they'll have to go to the clergy of Iran and ask for clemency on behalf of these 59 UN staffers.
With that, I would like to thank Ms. Shruti Dasgupta for joining us today and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. According to reports, shells of unknown origin has hit near Syria's Mezzeh military airport in Damascus. 3 shells struck the airport, but no casualties or material damage were reported. Authorities have discovered 4 missile launchers, though the party responsible and the exact launch locations remain unknown. Earlier, residents heard an explosion in the vicinity of Damascus, prompting an official investigation. The incident comes amid ongoing U.S. efforts to mediate between Syria and Israel. Reports in November suggested Washington plans to establish a military presence at a Damascus airbase to support a future security pact, which Damascus has partially denied, calling the report false. The Mezzeh airport lies near areas expected to form a demilitarized zone as part of the proposed Israel-Syria non-aggression agreement. U.S. mediation seeks to de-escalate regional tensions and ensure a framework for security, while Syria and Israel continue discussions over disputed land and future military arrangements. And that's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.